Okay, it is 10 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Building Resilience, a tactical guide for developing a firm foundation for mind, body, and spirit. I would like to start with a couple of reminders. This session is recorded and will be available on the conference platform 1 hour after the session ends. Please keep yourselves muted unless the presenter asks otherwise. Make sure to join live today because we'll be doing a prize drawing for attendance within each session. The conference is also offering free continuing education credits. For more information, visit the continuing education page. I'm excited to introduce Brenda Dietzman. Thank you, Brenda.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dina. I really appreciate this opportunity. And just a little background about me, because I hate reading those super dry. Oh, we're going to mute. Everybody make sure that you're muted. There you go. I hate reading those super dry bios. So I am the retired undersheriff from Wichita, Kansas. And when I left, I decided that I would go out and travel and do a lot of talking. And some people might call it training, but I like to think of it as traveling and talking. So I really enjoyed this subject, especially because of, well, let's get into it and I'll tell you why. Here is my why. I spent 28 years in law enforcement, and during that time, what I saw these bright, shiny people coming into helping professions, not just law enforcement, but corrections and social work and the medical field and anything that, helps people, those helping professions. And I saw people coming into this profession, and a lot of us thrived, right? We really appreciated that compassion, satisfaction that we got from doing our jobs. But then others didn't do so well. And I was like, how are we taking these people that are willing to give everything, and they get hurt, they get dented, right? And how do we do that? How does this profession do that? And how can we make it where people can go from, gonna ask everybody to mute again.
I'm trying to catch them as they come in, and they're not muted. I'm trying to mute them.
All right, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. I have nothing else. I'll just take out my ear. Well, I can't because it's my microphone. Anyway, sorry. I wanted to do something to give people the tools that they needed to get through this profession where they're thriving and not just surviving. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, I want you to think about, I want you to think about yourself. So the stuff, I want you to intentionally, apply this to you. And then I want you to think about your team and those other people that you serve, right? What can you do for them, and what can you pass on for them? Now, if you've flown, you've gotten the talk about, you put the mask on first. That's the overkill on this subject, right? We use that analogy all the time. But really think about that, because if you don't have that oxygen, you're not going to be able to help anybody else. So you really need to fill up your own cup and your own resilience bank. I do have a friend that doesn't like to fly as much as what I do. And she was like, those masks, there's not really oxygen in there. She goes, you know what those masks are for? Yeah, they're to muffle the screams. That's all they're good for. So, but still, right, the analogy's there. So please put your own mask on first and really apply this to your own life. So a good friend of mine one time told me, you don't know until you know, right? There are so many things that I'm going to talk about today. You're going to be like, yeah, sure, I know that. But first of all, do you really know it, right? You bring it from back here, put it up in here into your prefrontal cortex, and really start to think about it and how it applies to you and how you can help other people with this knowledge as well. Really applying it intentionally. And what we're going to do today is we're going to label some things. We're going to define some things. It's going to be kind of the boring part, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And then we're going to explain the why behind some of these things, about why these things are important and why they're important to do. Like, for instance, drinking water, right? We all know that that's good for us, but do we know why? And maybe if we knew the why, it might help us drink a little bit more water. So we're going to explain the why on some things as well. And again, as I said before, be intentional about this. Be intentional about this. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the definition of resilience. Now, a lot of people say, you know, it's the ability to bounce back after you've been knocked down, right? Or to get back up. I call that the Tigger syndrome, right? The, you know, Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, he bounces back, right? Bounces everywhere he goes. But I want to expand that idea of resilience a little bit, because for all of us that have these type A personalities, or that like to fix things, because we're all fixers, right? That's why we got into these jobs. That we can actually do something about this to build resilience, because so many people often think that you're just born with a certain amount of resilience and that's it. And you just have to slog through, you just have to survive life. But it's so much more than that. So here is kind of my idea of resiliency. Right? It's the capacity to prepare for, cope with, and grow through adversity. So we can actually prepare for adversity and trauma in our lives. And that's what we're going to talk about the vast majority today. And then cope with, right?
No, you all right. Mm-hmm. No, he
Okay, I
left.
was wondering, nobody can hear her. I'll reach her.
No. Mm-mm. Because they didn't want her over there. They didn't want him over there. Mm-hmm. But she said it's understandable because what Monty them saw, they was about to
Please
bop.
mute, please mute yourself.
Is this working now? There we go. Okay, awesome. Sorry about that, folks. Let me back up a little bit here. So we all know what adversity is, right? Adversity is a state of hardship, difficulty, or misfortune one deals with in life. You get that, right? We all understand what adversity is. But I want you to think about what trauma is, right? Psychological trauma is a result of extraordinarily stressful events that shatter your sense of security, making you feel helpless in a dangerous world. We don't control the events that go on. 2 years ago, if I would have told you that we were all going to start working from home, that we would all have these webcams and we'd do meetings over Zoom, you'd be like, what's Zoom, right? We just wouldn't know. But this external threat, which I'm going to talk about here in a bit, came in and shattered that sense of security that we had. So that's what trauma is. But I'm sure probably some of you have read the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, right? And this is what he says about traumatization. Traumatization occurs when both internal and external resources are inadequate to cope with an external threat, right? Internal and external resources inadequate to cope with an external threat. And we'll get into that here in a bit as well. So what's vicarious trauma? It's sometimes called secondary trauma, and you probably, being the professionals in this field that you are, probably know what this is, right? But it's the indirect exposure to trauma or adversity through either hearing it or seeing it. So when I was a young deputy, when I went out to car accident scenes, I would see that trauma. I would see that adversity that people were going through. It wasn't happening to me personally, and it wasn't happening to anyone that I knew, but I was seeing it. It was vicarious trauma. And then when I became a detective and I was getting the sexual assault victims that were coming in, or other victims of other crime that were coming in, I would hear about it. It wasn't happening to me or someone that I cared about. It was secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. But here's the interesting thing about this. The body processes both primary trauma that happens to me, and vicarious trauma the exact same way, right? It affects the systems in our body the exact same way. So we really, knowing that we're going to be opened up to more trauma and adversity through vicarious trauma in this line, this field that we're in, we really have to build those internal and external resources to deal with those external threats or those external traumas and adversity. So here's another thing that I want us to think about, right? Everyone's different, and so are their struggles and their reaction to trauma and adversity. Right? What traumatizes you may not traumatize me, but what traumatizes me may not traumatize you. So when somebody says, when they come in and they say, that was a tough call, or that was a tough appointment, or whatever the case may be, we have to take them for their word for whatever reason. And then we also have to kind of be vulnerable and let people know what we find hard and difficult to do. So maybe they can take that appointment or that call or something like that. And we can take things for them that are very hard for them to do. The other thing I want us to think about is that how do we react to somebody that has a physical injury as opposed to a mental health issue? I know personally in law enforcement, which is kind of seen as sort of, the tough person type, we're not usually all that vulnerable, is that when somebody got in a car accident, or they fell and broke a leg, or they got hurt when they were trying to take somebody into custody or something, oh my goodness, we were all over that, right? We took care of those folks. We took anything that had cheese or pasta, right, in the dish, filled up their refrigerator, filled up their freezer. We took care of their kids. We mowed their yard, shoveled the snow, whatever the case may be. But when somebody was out on a hard call, or somebody was having a hard time with something, we tended to shy away, and we didn't reach out and say, that was a tough call for me too, just checking to see how you're doing type thing. So we really need to pay attention to people that are having a hard time after a hard situation, trauma, adversity, whether it's professional or personal, right? And reach out and help in that same way. The other thing we tend to do is we tend to deal with problems after they happen, right? When you hear about a school shooting, the very last thing the TV announcer says is what? Right? Counselors will be available if needed, which is great. We need that. But how about building that resilience? How about building those things, those skills before we need them? Wouldn't that be so much better to do it that way? We still need the counselors. We still need the therapists afterwards. Absolutely. But how about building resilience, not only as an individual, but as a community before we need it? We need to teach those techniques and those healthy coping strategies, because so many people through childhood trauma have developed unhealthy or not as healthy as they should be coping techniques that really affect them long into their adult life. So not the last time you're going to see this today, right? Resiliency, the capacity to prepare for, cope with, and grow through adversity. I want to dig into that just a little bit more. Okay? So resilience is the capacity to prepare for. This is what we call pre-traumatic growth. And it's learning about developing tools and resources before we need them. And then cope with, using positive coping techniques to deal with those external threats, that trauma and adversity. I like to say that people in the helping profession are usually pretty resilient people before they get into it. A lot of that goes back to having potentially like a high ACE score or something like that. And they have gone through a lot before they even get into the profession. And what happens as a result of that is that we're the tough people, right? We're the fixers. We're the ones that people come to when their worlds are falling apart for us to fix it. And it cannot just be professional, but it can also be personal, right? Your family, your friends, when their worlds are falling apart, they come to you for help, guidance, for you to help fix it, whatever it is. We're the fixers. So we have a tendency to be stoic, to be the strong one, right? And not use these tools that we have in our toolbox. I kind of liken it to a car mechanic who's driving down the road and the car sputters and stops and you coast over to the side of the road. They've got the knowledge to fix the car. They probably even have tools in the trunk, right? But they just sit there and they're like, yeah, well, it's gonna get better, just a matter of time. I'm just gonna ride this one out and maybe get in that good night's sleep. I'll just sleep here in the car and maybe the car will be better in the morning, right? We actually have to use our tools and our knowledge to get through trauma and adversity in a healthy way. So coping with and using those positive coping techniques is very important because we have a tendency not to do that. We just have a tendency to power through. And then the last part of this is grow through. And this is that post-traumatic growth, right? Finding meaning and purpose in the lessons in what we've been through. And sometimes that is extremely hard to find. And sometimes you don't ever find it. But if it's in some way can make you better, can make you more compassionate, kinder, trying to find that silver lining in whatever happens is really important. Now, with that said, you can absolutely hate that trauma and adversity happened, whether it was to you personally or through vicarious trauma or secondary trauma. You can hate that the event happened, but what did you gain from it? Right? And it might just be the simple fact that, you've had someone in your life or you've had the blessing of whatever. Right? Finding that meaning is so important. That's in that post-traumatic growth. So I've talked a little bit about Dr. van der Kolk's definition of traumatization. And in it, he talks about internal and external resources. Now, what are those internal and external resources? Well, it can be really simple. Internal are things like your health, your faith, right? A spiritual practice, maybe a personal mission statement, or just your purpose in life can be an incredible internal resource. External resources can be a whole bunch of things. Can be family, friends, pets. I work with a animal rescue here in Wichita, and at the beginning of the pandemic, we couldn't keep cats and puppies and dogs or anything on the shelf, as they say. They were just flying out the door because people wanted companionship while they were in quarantine or in isolation. So unfortunately, now what we're seeing a lot of those pets being returned because people are getting back out and having that connection with other human beings. But pets can be an incredible external resource for us. It could be exercise. It could be a therapist. It could be like a church or like a physical place where you can go and be with other people to help you build those external resources. And I've also broken it down into 4 different categories. So there can be social resources, physical, mental, and spiritual resources. Okay. So I want you to take a look at that and think about what are your internal and external resources? What do you use to cope with trauma and adversity and to help you during that post-traumatic growth? And you'll see this again, but I want to go back to what Dr. van der Kolk says about traumatization. And this might make a little bit more sense at this point. Traumatization occurs when both internal and external resources are inadequate to cope with an external threat. So understand this, we can control for the most part internal and external resources, but you can't control that external threat. Okay? We can't control that pandemic. We can't control sometimes those car accidents that happen, or a bad diagnosis, or becoming a victim of a crime, or whatever it is. But we can build, right? Prepare for adversity. We can build these internal and external resources. So I want you to take a good look at that. And I really want you to think about, intentionally think about, what are your internal and external resources? And then the other thing I want you to think about, is it all in one category? Right? Or is it spread out? Do you have a good mix of both social, physical, mental, and spiritual resources in your life that make you more resilient? These resources that you can draw on in times of trauma and adversity. Because that's what you can control. So just take a good look at that. Now, I want you to think about also, how can you develop these? Now, some of these you may not have, right? So you may not have a therapist. Highly recommend it, right? So you can develop that resource. You can acquire that resource, but there might be other things that you are continuously developing in your life. For instance, family or friends. You can take that external resource and actually develop it by what? By spending time with them, by getting to know them better, by letting them get to know you better. So we can acquire resources, new resources, and we can continue to develop the ones that we already have. And by doing so, we become more resilient. So now what I want to do is I want to get into some of these tools and actually explain the why behind why some of these tools are so important. And I've tried to give a good balance of different tools that we're going to talk about today. So as we go through this, I just want you to think about these tools, and can you actually incorporate them into your life, or can you develop them more? And maybe some of this knowledge is going to give you more motivation to actually participate, or to use these tools a little bit better, develop them a little bit better. So the first thing I want to talk about is a daily routine. And I say daily routine because I talk to a lot of first responders. So their morning might be at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I always say a daily routine, but for most people that work 8 to 5, I always call it a daily routine for that fact. But just getting up in the morning, whenever that morning is, and drinking a glass of tea or drinking a glass of water could be so healthy. It could be a really great way to start the day off, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And spending time in either meditation or prayer or just in quiet. Our lives are so noisy. There's just noise everywhere. And if we could spend just a little bit of time, either meditation or prayer, or quiet even, the benefits of that are so it's so well researched, right? It's just such a great thing. And people are like, oh, I don't have time for that. I just don't have time for that. Well, I want you to think about something. And if there's any math whizzes out there, you'll get this right away. But if you do something for 10 minutes a day, every day for an entire year, do you know how many hours that is? It's 60 hours. Now, can you imagine If somebody came up to you and said, hey, I ran the stairs for 60 hours last year, you'd be like, what? You did what? Wow, you are really in shape, right? But in the end, it's just 10 minutes a day. So again, it's like that, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with what? One step. So just spending 10, even 5 minutes in prayer, meditation, or in quiet in the morning can be really helpful. Reading is the same way. I'm sure January 1st, just like all of you, I was like, I'm going to read 5,000 books this year. Well, of course that didn't happen. But we tend to make these grand plans, right? And then we get overwhelmed by how big they are. But again, 10 minutes a day, 60 hours a year. How many books could you read in 60 hours? Probably quite a few. So keep that in mind. Also, movement and exercise. And it could be stretching, it could be taking a walk, or it could be going for a run or lifting weights or yoga or something like that. Right? But just that movement gets the body's systems working and engages them. And a diary. We won't talk too much about this moving forward, but a diary is really important because the mind actually pays attention to inconsistencies in our world. So the older we get, time seems to fly more. Well, it's because there's no inconsistencies, that our mind wakes us up from the little shortcuts that we have and says, hey, pay attention to this. This is something unique. This is something interesting. Instead, we just float through life and things we've been there, done that, and we lose that inconsistency, seeing those inconsistencies. So it's really important to keep track of what we do so we can go back and see all of the fun and interesting things that we would have long forgotten had they weren't not written down. And it helps us reflect and be grateful as well on our day and the blessings that we have in our lives. Journaling does a lot of those same things. It allows us to get to know ourselves better. We'll talk about that here more in a bit, as well as a gratitude practice, which I am a huge fan of. Now, don't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever to get all of these things done. Pick and choose, right? Find what works for you, first of all. And then secondly, you don't have to do all of these things every single day, right? You might pray, meditate, spend some time in quiet on Monday morning before the week starts. And then on Tuesday, you might read for 10 minutes. And then on Wednesday, you might go for a walk. Thursday, you might journal. But find what works for you and come up with this daily or morning routine. Because most successful people that you read about their biographies, absolutely have this practice. So let's talk a little bit about drinking water. Drinking water is really important. We all get it, right? But let's explain the why behind it. Well, first of all, our body's about 60% water. So if we're dehydrated, that really takes a lot out of us, right? So it helps maintain that balance of fluids in our body. It also helps control calories. So if you're trying to lose weight, that's very important as well. And if you ever get your body is exhausted, might not be that it's exhausted, it might be that it's dehydrated, because the cells shrivel when they don't maintain that balance of fluids and those electrolytes that you have. So water can help energize the muscles. It also helps that skin keep looking good. I'm 54 years old, almost 55, and these little lines aren't getting any better, but I can tell when I'm dehydrated, okay, the lines get a little bit deeper. So water helps the skin keep looking good. And it also helps clean out those kidneys, right? If you've ever known anybody that's had to be on dialysis, that's a very time-consuming thing. So keeping your kidneys cleaned out and free of toxins and waste is really important, and a great way to do that is through water. So water, great external resource to us. That becomes internal and helps us internally, helps our bodies function better. And hopefully by seeing some of these reasons why they're so important, might give you some motivation actually go and pick up a glass of water later today. So hopefully a few of you've got some at your desk right now. Next thing I want to talk about is, and I know this is crazy, right? But I want to talk about bananas. And I want to give you, and I do not get reimbursed or I don't get endorsement deals from Dole Bananas or anything. But I really think this is fascinating to just find out why bananas are so good for us. So unripe green bananas, which are the only bananas that I will eat because those mushy, nasty, they're not good for, yeah, those are just nasty. So the unripe green bananas, though, they help lower cholesterol and blood pressure. But those bananas with the dark spots, which I don't know anybody, and please, if you like these, put your name in the chat and I'll send you all of mine if they go bad. The ones with the dark spots are 8 times more effective at enhancing the power of white blood cells, which are our immunity, right? It helps with our immunity. Really important right now. They tell me that the more ripe the banana is, the healthier it is for us to eat because of the way that the cells change as the banana ages. So kind of interesting there. But look at this, just one banana, right? 13% of your potassium, which can help lower blood pressure, your pulse, among other things. Potassium is an incredibly powerful product in your body. 15% of your daily recommended vitamin C, 12% of your fiber, very important, right? But it can also help us overcome depression because of the same thing that's in turkeys, right? And it also has a very high amount of vitamin B6. It can help you sleep well. Magnesium helps relax the muscles and also protects against type 2 diabetes. So just eating just one banana a day, can you imagine the health benefits that you would get from that? And there's other foods, right? So I like to talk about a curiosity journal and why are Brussels sprouts good for me? And actually examining that because I like Brussels sprouts personally, but it might actually motivate you to eat a few more in your lifetime. So
Brenda, in the
just
chat,
finding those things out really helps with the motivation.
somebody said
Exercise and movement, we all know that that's good for us as well, right? It helps control weight, produces heart disease, blood sugar, maintains blood sugar, all this good stuff. We all know this. But you're like, great, you want me to go out and run like a half marathon every day? No, just look at this. 2 long-term Harvard studies found that simply walking 20 minutes a day may reduce your heart disease risk by up to 30%. Okay? Just getting out and moving, and it's even better in the morning for you because it gets your systems working better. Okay? Just a little bit of motivation and letting you know you don't have to go out and run a 5K every morning. Right? If you do, great, but you don't have to. Just walking 20 minutes a day. Another thing I like to talk about when I do these talks is something called time multipliers. Now, that's not multitasking. Multitasking is when you're trying to do 2 things that divide your attention at the same time. Right? That's, science tells us that only about 1.84% of us can do that. So if you're an actual multitasker, good for you. But I'm talking about time multipliers. And this is doing 2 things at the same time that help build internal and external resources for you, and intentionally doing those things at the same time. So for instance, instead of just going out and taking a walk by yourself, maybe meet up with a neighbor or a friend that is a good external resource for you, right? That can make the bad times not so bad and the good times even better. Right? Because you're getting exercise and you're also building the bond between the 2 of you, which gets the internal resource and an external resource. Now, the fun thing is trying to do 3 or 4 things at the same time that build 3 or 4 internal and external resources at the same time. So that's a challenge for you. But again, thinking intentionally, we do this stuff all the time, but thinking intentionally about it might be a really good thing. So the next time you sit down to write out your grocery list, maybe sit down with your kid and let them see you do that and why you make the choices that you do. You're building the bond between them. You might be talking about finances. You also are talking about healthy eating, right? And you're growing that skill for them for when they get out of the house and they're growing up. So think about those time multipliers, because exercise and movement is a great time to do that. Next thing I want to talk about is journaling, right? Journaling helps us become more self-aware. I was not a huge, I didn't have a lot of belief in journaling, but once I retired a few years ago, I decided, I'm going to try some different things for the first year, one new thing every month. And I retired in December, and in February of that next year, I actually took up journaling, and I have not stopped. It is an incredible cathartic learning experience for me that I absolutely love. It's really helped clarify a lot of who and what I am, and allows me to live life more intentionally, and solves problems, resolves disagreement, and it really helps deepens your learning. As a result of that, you can hit that last part of that resilience phrase that I gave you earlier, sentence that I gave you earlier, right? Prepare for, cope with, and grow through adversity. A lot of times you can find that post-traumatic growth in your writing, which is so valuable. And there's a lot of different types of journaling. There's where you just sit down and just start writing whatever is in your mind. You can do guided journaling, where you take journal prompts. You can get them from the internet. At the end of this presentation, I'll give you one to think about. But there's a lot of different kinds, and find what works for you. Find what works for you. Next thing I want to talk about is a gratitude practice. Now, there's a lot of research out there on this subject, but one of the studies that I really like, it's very simplistic, right? University of Indiana took a whole bunch of college kids and told them to write 3 gratitude letters, 1 gratitude letter per week for 3 weeks. And it was just a letter about something that they were grateful for. So they did this, and what they found is that it produced a greater neural sensitivity in the medial prefrontal cortex. Now, as most of you know, this is the thinking, higher functioning part of our brain. It's the newest part of our brain. It's where complex thinking and decisions are made. And so when there's greater neural sensitivity and density in that area, we actually have more neural pathways, which is a good thing. And they're more sensitive, so they work better, work more efficiently because of this practice. The students also showed behavioral increases in gratitude. What that means is that they actually went out and looked for things to be grateful for. And the effects of this persisted for 3 months. 3 letters, 3 weeks. The effects persisted for 3 months. Now, there's a whole bunch of studies out there dealing with gratitude and how that builds optimism, and optimism helps you lead a more happy, successful life. You have better relationships if you're more optimistic. You make more money. You're probably better educated. All of these things. So a gratitude practice is an incredibly powerful thing, and it really doesn't take that much time. There are so many different ways to do it as well. I gave this talk about a year ago now, and a lady sent me an email, and she goes, Brenda, she goes, I was thinking about this and thinking about my kids, and they're all grown now. And she's like, if I would have just asked them every single night when I was putting them to sleep, putting them to bed, what they were grateful for, or maybe what they were happy for, or how they were kind that day, they would have actually started looking for things to be grateful for, even as a kid, or ways to be kind as a kid. And she goes, I had a lot of guilt about that, because I know that if I would have done that when they were a kid, I would have burned that optimism, that gratitude, that seeking of gratitude into their neural pathways. And she goes, so you know what I did? She goes, I texted my son. He's a captain in the military. And I said, what are you grateful for today? And he writes back, Well, that's a strange question. I'm grateful I live in Florida. The next day, she texts him again. What are you grateful for today? And he writes back, he texts back, he goes, so this is a thing now. Okay, all right, we'll go with this. And he said, I'm thankful, I'm grateful that you're my mom. Oh, right? You want to talk about building internal and external resources just all over the place? Not only is she teaching him, right, to look for things to be grateful for, right, and that's what he's doing, because he knows he's going to get this question every single day now, but also greater neural sensitivity in the prefrontal cortex. We want our leaders to have that, but it's also strengthening, and most importantly, strengthening that bond between a mom and her son, which are, that's an incredible external resource. I want you to think about that, not only as a mom or a dad or a grandpa or grandma or aunt, uncle, whatever it is, but think about it in your friendships. Think about it as a leader in an organization, or an informal leader even in an organization, or with your clients. Just asking that one simple question might make all the difference to them. Okay. Gratitude practice, I spend a lot of time on it because it's just so important. So sleep, let's talk about that a little bit. Sleep's your superpower. We all know that getting enough sleep is important. It's stress on our body. If we don't get it, it raises our inflammation levels, which can lead to all sorts of nasty things. Memory consolidation occurs during sleep. So our brain, right, takes in information all day, stores it in short-term memory, and then during a certain portion of our sleep cycle, those short-term memories get moved to our long-term memory. And if that isn't done correctly, they can be fragmented, which can lead to all sorts of problems, or we just lose them completely. So getting the right amount of sleep, especially after trauma and adversity, is so important. And then there's a lot of other things here, but just going down to this last one, right? Sleep plays a role in clearing beta amyloid out of the brain. Now, if we were in person, I'd ask, does anybody know what that is? And a few of you probably would raise your hand because you know somebody that, or you have a loved one that has dementia or Alzheimer's. Beta amyloid is the metabolic waste product that our brain produces that causes that plaque and the clustering of plaque in our brains. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty about how dementia, Alzheimer's starts. So I know that there's a lot of different theories out there, but one of the theories is that beta amyloid does not get cleaned out if we don't sleep. Because again, going back to a certain portion of our sleep cycle, a little vacuum cleaner comes into our brain and will suck out that beta amyloid, but that only happens at night. Our brain gets rid of waste very differently than the rest of our body. The rest of our body cleanses it out all of the time, but our brain stores it until we sleep. So extremely important for that reason alone to get the right amount of sleep. So speaking of sleep and caffeine, I don't want everybody to leave this session because you're going to be like, oh, don't take away my caffeine, Brenda. Just do not do that. I want to teach you instead about how caffeine works on the body. And it's as simple as this. If you have 100 milligrams of caffeine in a cup of coffee or whatever today at lunchtime, caffeine has a 5 to 6 hour half-life. So at dinner time tonight, or like 6 o'clock tonight, you just cut that in half, right? So you'll have 50 milligrams left from that cup of coffee. But then at midnight tonight, you'll still have around 25 milligrams of caffeine in your system. And you're like, okay, that's great, but just tell me how much is going to do damage, because most of us are going to have caffeine in our system at some point during the day. So here it is. Science tells us that around 200 milligrams of caffeine in your system when you go to bed at night it will cause you to lose about an hour of sleep. Okay, so 200 milligrams in your system, you're going to lose an hour of sleep. Even if you're in bed, you're going to lose an hour of sleep every single night. And do I have to remind you why sleep is important? So my suggestion to you is if you're going to take some caffeine in, make sure that you do it earlier on in the day, whatever that looks like. So another external, and I'm all over the place, right? Because we've got external and internal resources in all different areas, that social, mental, physical, spiritual categories, right? They're all over the place. So let's think about financial. They say that money can't buy happiness, but boy, it can cause a lot of problems if we don't have it, and a lot of stress in our lives, right? And cause those external threats, which could be like a transmission going out in your car, right? Some people can handle that a lot better. Why? Because they have the external resource of an emergency fund, or a fund where they can pay for that. If you don't have that, it adds all sorts of stresses to your life. So it's important to build this. Now, my attorney would want me to say this disclaimer that I'm not a financial advisor, but please go to bankrate.com calculator to do your own math here. But I just want you to think about this: $100 a month for 35 years at 8%, you're going to have $250,000 in the bank. And it's never too late to start, right? We just have to start. That journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Building that external resource so you have it in times of trauma or adversity is very important. And talk to your kids about this. Talk to your kids about this. I had a sergeant that talked to me about it when I was around 24 years old, started saving $7.50 out of my paycheck, every paycheck. And it's, now that I'm 55, I'm so thankful that he took the time to do that. So talk with your kids, talk with your spouse, talk to your coworkers, those people who work for you if you're a supervisor, and talk to them about how valuable this is. They will be eternally thankful to you if you do. Next thing I want you to think about specifically, because of the field that you are in, is developing a trauma recovery plan. Now, this plan is developed when you are in a good place, not when you are in the throes of a trauma or an adversity of some sort. So all this is you take out a piece of paper, or you write it on the computer, or whatever, wherever, the note section on your phone, and you answer these 3 questions. When I am in trauma, when I am in adversity, and I need to use an external tool or an internal tool, what am I going to do? Who am I going to reach out to? Where am I going to go? And what am I going to do? And you come up with different healthy options under each one of those questions. And then when you're in trauma and you're in adversity and all you want to do is sleep all day and night, or go to the bar, or call that friend you know that's going to be like, let's eat a gallon of ice cream and get drunk, right? You're going to look at this trauma recovery plan and actually choose off of that, who am I going to call in this situation? Because it might not be the same person for everything that you're going through, right? You might have this friend for this situation. You might have a therapist for that situation, whatever the case may be. And then what am I going to do and where am I going to go? And you're going to choose from those 3 questions the things that are going to best feed you and allow you to cope with the trauma and adversity, and then grow through it, right? That post-traumatic growth, helping you find that meaning and the purpose behind that adversity. Trauma recovery plan, you can use this for yourself, you can use it for clients, you can use it for whoever. This is an incredibly powerful tool to help you make healthy decisions. Well, the last thing that I want to talk about today is the breath. The breath is an incredibly powerful thing. It's absolutely free. You don't have a membership to it, right? It's just there for us. And the breath is so important because of this. We have our autonomic nervous system in our body, right? And within that system, we have the parasympathetic and we have the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. Now, hang with me because there's a reason I'm going to teach you about this. So in the parasympathetic system, right, that is the one that slows our heart rate down, slows our pulse, allows us to digest food, right? It's called the rest and digest system. On the other side, we have the sympathetic branch of our autonomic nervous system. And that's the system that gets us going, right? That's our fight or flight. That's the one that raises our heart rate, that gets blood to the right place, that shuts down our digestion so we can survive. And we're breathing in and out every day. How do we access the parasympathetic branch of our autonomic nervous system? Well, I'm glad you asked, because this is how we do it. We can do it through the breath. So one of the ways that we can calm ourselves, keep ourselves in our prefrontal cortex as opposed to our amygdala, right, is to do it through our breath. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's box breathing, all those different things. I like to do it this way. Those other ways are valid as well, but I like to do it this way. So when we inhale, we are activating the sympathetic branch of our autonomic nervous system. That's the one that gets our heart rate up, blood pressure, gets us ready to go. But when we breathe out, we engage the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And that decreases the heart rate, the blood pressure, the muscle tone, allows digestion to occur. So how you get into more of the parasympathetic as opposed to the sympathetic branch. If your shoulders start to feel tense, if you start to feel overwhelmed, if you just take about 2 or 3 minutes and just do this simple breathing exercise, it will help you get into the parasympathetic branch. And you do it this way. You breathe in for a count of 3 or 4, and you breathe out for a count of like 5 or 6. So the exhale is longer than the inhale. And doing that, you're actually engaging that parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system more than you do the sympathetic branch. Okay. Lowers the heart rate, everything like that. So 2 or 3 minutes of that, and set up if-then statements. If I start to feel overwhelmed, there's just too much going on, I'm going to stop, spend 2 or 3 minutes on this breathing exercise. I'm going to intentionally relax my body. Deepak Chopra has a great quote out there that says, "My body is busy, but I am not." We're all busy. How do we calm our system down? So the next time you start to feel tense, overwhelmed, whatever, take a few minutes and do that. So we talked about a lot today. I'm so excited that so many of you are on here today. I want you to take one last look at this, and I want you to think about those internal and external resources that you have right now and be grateful for those. Right? Be thankful for those. Maybe even reach out and tell family, friends, or coworkers, whoever, that you're thankful that they're in your life and that you're that internal or external resource for them. And then think about also the internal and external resources that you want to acquire over time to help make yourself more resilient, and those that you want to develop. And then maybe even using time multipliers to do that. So last time you get to see this today, right? Resiliency, the capacity to prepare for, cope with, and grow through adversity. We have to do all 3 of those things to live a healthy, happy, and resilient life. So I told you at the end of this, I was going to give you a journal prompt that maybe you can spend some time today doing, because I think it would really, really, really make you think and live a little bit more intentional. And it is this: what does it mean for you to live a great story? What does it mean for you to live a great story? In the download section of this webinar, you're going to have a 7-day resilience challenge. There's 14 things on there for you to do, so you can pick and choose what works for you, right, to make you more resilient and to build those internal and external resources that you have. So I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for everything that you do. I appreciate you so much. And Dina, I'm ready for some questions, my friend.
Okay, so we've had a couple questions.
Just a minute, because I can't hear you here. Hang on. Okay, I think I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the questions in the chat was, we had comment that bananas with the dark spots make great smoothies. The other question was, where's the 8% interest rate bank?
Right? Exactly. It's the stock market. If we had a little bit more time, I'd actually show you some charts from the stock market. But it does go up over time. So that's probably your best bet. But yeah, I think right now, I think the interest rate on my checking account's like 0.5% or something like that. So yeah, I appreciate that question. And I didn't catch the first one. I'm sorry.
Oh, the first one was the bananas with the dark spots you don't like. Great, work great in smoothies.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's good. But I agree. I use them in smoothies and banana bread, I've heard, and things like that. So it is the holiday season. So go eat that banana bread, I guess.
That's right. And in the chat, we have lots of thank yous, great presentation, and everyone really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Good. Oh, that makes me so happy. Yeah, I love talking about this subject, and I love talking to good people that give so much of themselves to help other people. I just hope that people have spent a little time thinking about their resources, how to acquire some new ones, how to develop the ones that you have intentionally, and by doing so, you're gonna live an awesome story. So, thanks for your time, everybody. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Brenda. We appreciate you.
Are we good to go, my friend?
We are good to go. And that was excellent, Brenda.
Good.
The sleep and the water thing, I learned some new things there. And the banana thing, I love bananas. And so to find out type 2 diabetes, that it can prevent it, I figure out it's good to eat it while maybe it'll lower my blood sugar, right?
There you go. It's so funny because I usually use that banana example when I go out and do training. So I'll be like in an airport and somebody that has seen me give the presentation, whenever, they'll be like, I got a banana.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I love it. That's one of the fruits I buy at Quick Stops is bananas.
Yeah, right. It's
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's one of the best things you can buy at airports, and they're so cheap. So it's yeah, but I appreciate the fact that I'm known as the banana lady. So
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, that was a great slide that you don't see in other presentations. So, yeah, so you never know. I might be reaching out to you for some additional information on some of this one of these days.
you know what? I had I was just speaking out in California a few weeks ago, and I just got an email last night from a friend of somebody who attended my session. She wasn't even at the conference, and she's like, she wrote this big long thing. She goes, I need help on this and this. I was like, that's awesome. I love that. So
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
great. That's great. Thank you.
Would love to chat. So anytime, my friend, you've got my number there.
I do, and I got your info there. I wrote that down too. So thank you so much. And have a wonderful day.
All right. Take care, my friend.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.